A racist mayor's contempt for restaurant workers and the expensive lesson it taught him. The mayor of the town was a man who had everything most people could only dream of. He lived in a big house on the highest hill of the city, drove expensive cars, and wore clothes from the best designers. People often described him as confident, powerful, and respected in public, but behind closed doors, he carried a different side of himself, a side full of prejudice and arrogance. He believed that some people were naturally better than others, and he did not hesitate to show it, especially to those he considered beneath him. He thought that anyone working in a service job, especially in restaurants or shops, should act quickly, smile constantly, and, most importantly, never challenge him or question his presence. To him, their value was only measured by how well they served people like him. One bright afternoon, the mayor decided to visit one of the most popular restaurants in town. It was not only famous for its delicious meals but also for its welcoming atmosphere and hard-working staff. Many local families and business people loved to go there, and the restaurant prided itself on treating every customer with kindness and respect. The staff had spent years learning the menu, improving their skills, and creating a friendly environment, where customers felt important and appreciated. They had a reputation for professionalism, patience, and care, even when facing rude or difficult patrons. The mayor arrived with a small entourage. 2 assistants followed him closely, carrying briefcases and making notes, while a bodyguard walked behind, keeping an eye on the surroundings. The restaurant manager greeted him politely at the entrance, bowing slightly out of respect, while the staff prepared to serve him. Some of the workers recognized the mayor immediately. They had seen him in the news, at public events, and sometimes during campaigns where he promised to improve the city. But knowing someone's face on television was very different from having them walk into your workplace and immediately demand attention. The mayor scanned the restaurant with a critical eye. He frowned as he looked around, noticing the decorations, the way the tables were set, and the uniforms the staff wore. Nothing seemed to meet his high standards. When the manager approached him with a smile, the mayor's expression did not soften. Instead, he looked him up and down, shaking his head slightly and muttering under his breath. His words were quiet but sharp, a mix of disapproval and impatience. "This isn't good enough," he said, speaking to his assistant rather than the manager. "Everything looks cheap." As the mayor was led to his table, he began to make his demands. He wanted the best table, one with the most privacy, and he asked for specific dishes that were not even on the current menu. He demanded that certain ingredients be replaced with others that he preferred, ignoring the fact that some items were seasonal or unavailable. He spoke loudly, ensuring that everyone in the restaurant could hear his instructions. The staff nodded politely, trying to keep up with his requests, but the mayor's impatience grew with every delay. When the waiter approached to take his order, the mayor immediately criticized him. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I hope you've served someone like me before. I don't want any mistakes." His words were not only rude but also condescending. The waiter, a young man who had been working there for 5 years and had served hundreds of customers, smiled politely and nodded. He kept his tone calm, even though he felt uncomfortable. "Of course, sir. I will make sure everything is perfect for you," he replied, trying to defuse the situation. But the mayor was not satisfied. He began to point out small details: the way the plates were arranged, the color of the napkins, and even the staff's posture. He mocked one of the servers for having a slight accent, making a joke at her expense in front of the other customers. The woman's face turned red, and she kept her head down, trying to ignore him while continuing her work. A few regular customers looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves. Some were angry, but they knew confronting a powerful political figure in public could be risky. The mayor's contempt did not stop there. He leaned back in his chair and spoke about his previous experiences in restaurants, saying he had been to the best places in the country and the world. He compared the staff unfavorably to those establishments, implying that they were unskilled and unworthy of serving someone of his status. Each comment was carefully pointed to humiliate the workers, and he smiled smugly as he did it, clearly enjoying the discomfort he caused. Despite the tension, the restaurant staff remained professional. They continued to move efficiently, taking orders, serving food, and cleaning tables. They exchanged quiet words among themselves, encouraging each other to stay calm and not let the mayor's arrogance affect their work. Many had encountered rude customers before, but this situation was different because of the mayor's position of power. It was clear that their every action was being scrutinized, and any mistake, no matter how small, could be used against them. As the meal continued, the mayor's demands increased. He asked for additional courses, changes to the menu, and even special treatment for his entourage. He criticized the way the drinks were served, the timing of the food, and even the temperature of the room. Each complaint was delivered with a tone of superiority, as if the restaurant existed only to serve him. The staff worked tirelessly to meet his expectations, but he remained unsatisfied. Meanwhile, some customers who had been quietly observing began to take out their phones, recording parts of the interaction. They were shocked by the mayor's behavior, especially because it was so public and blatant. Many of them had voted for him in the past or at least respected his position, but seeing him treat ordinary workers with such disrespect made them rethink their opinions. They whispered to each other, expressing disbelief and anger. Some wanted to confront him, but most stayed silent, unsure of how to react to someone so powerful in that moment. The manager, standing nearby, tried to calm the situation. He approached the mayor and spoke politely, explaining that certain requests could not be fulfilled immediately but offering alternatives that would meet the mayor's standards. The mayor waved him away dismissively, speaking louder than necessary to ensure that everyone heard his dissatisfaction. His behavior created an atmosphere of tension in the restaurant, and the staff felt a mix of anxiety and determination. They wanted to do their best, but they also knew that no matter what they did, he would likely find fault. By the time the mayor finished his meal, it was clear to everyone that his visit had not gone smoothly. The staff had worked tirelessly, showing patience, professionalism, and skill, but the mayor had left feeling entitled and unsatisfied. As he left the restaurant, he waved dismissively to the staff, not even acknowledging their efforts, and climbed into his waiting car, already planning his next appointment without a second thought. However, what the mayor did not realize was that his actions had been observed and remembered. The staff, though quietly humiliated in the moment, would share their experience with friends and family. Some customers had recorded the entire encounter on their phones. A few regular patrons, who had witnessed the arrogance and prejudice firsthand, left the restaurant feeling disappointed and angry, discussing the mayor's behavior as they went home. The visit, which the mayor thought would be just another routine lunch, was actually the beginning of a story that would spread far beyond the walls of the restaurant. It was the first time many people would see the mayor not as a powerful leader, but as a man who allowed prejudice and arrogance to define his actions. It was the first sign that wealth and position could not protect someone from the consequences of disrespecting others. The staff returned to their duties, quietly talking among themselves, sharing feelings of frustration and hope. They knew that the mayor's attitude was not their fault, and they felt proud of having handled the situation professionally. They knew the world was beginning to notice what they had endured, and that sense of recognition gave them strength. That day, the restaurant continued to buzz with life, the aroma of food filling the air, laughter and conversation mixing together, as ordinary people went about their day strong, resilient, and deserving of respect. And so, the mayor left the restaurant, unaware that this visit would mark the start of an event that would challenge everything he believed about power, privilege, and human dignity. He thought it was just another lunch, but in truth, it was the first step toward a lesson he would never forget. After the mayor left the restaurant, life inside the establishment slowly returned to normal. The staff continued their work, serving customers with smiles, cleaning tables, and preparing dishes. Yet, the tension from the mayor's visit lingered. The workers exchanged quiet words with each other, expressing relief that the ordeal was over but also frustration over the disrespect they had endured. It was not just a difficult customer, it was a person in power, someone who could influence the lives of many, openly showing disdain for them and their work. Unbeknownst to the mayor, one of the restaurant's regular customers had recorded the entire incident on their phone. The video was brief, but it captured the mayor's arrogance and the condescending way he spoke to the staff. The customer had initially thought it was shocking, but not worth sharing. However, as the day went on, they realized the importance of the moment. They wanted people to see how someone in power treated ordinary workers, how easily he dismissed their effort and professionalism. By evening, the video was uploaded to social media, accompanied by a short caption describing the mayor's behavior. Within hours, the video began to circulate. People from all over the town started commenting, sharing their opinions, and expressing their anger. "How can someone in such an important position act this way?" one comment read. "These workers deserve respect, not ridicule," wrote another. Many users tagged friends and family, increasing the reach of the video. By the next morning, local newspapers had noticed the story. Journalists contacted the restaurant and the mayor's office, seeking comments and interviews. The video, initially meant to show one unpleasant lunch experience, was now turning into a national story. The restaurant staff, while proud that people were recognizing their professionalism, also felt anxious. The mayor's influence was strong, and they worried about potential backlash. Would he retaliate in some way? Would their jobs be at risk? These thoughts weighed heavily on their minds, but they also knew they had done nothing wrong. They had treated the mayor with respect and had performed their duties with diligence, despite his rudeness. The sense of injustice was strong, but so was their determination to stand firm. The mayor, on the other hand, had no idea that his visit had become a viral sensation. He continued with his daily routine, attending meetings, signing documents, and greeting constituents at public events. Initially, he did not notice any unusual attention or messages. He believed that his influence and reputation were untouchable and that people would overlook a single unpleasant encounter in a restaurant. After all, he thought, he had seen many rude customers, and this was just another day in his life. But soon, the mayor began to notice changes. Staff members at his office started whispering, exchanging looks, and avoiding eye contact. Journalists started calling frequently, asking about the incident at the restaurant. Invitations to public events began to include questions from concerned citizens about his behavior. He realized that the video was gaining attention online, spreading not just in his town, but across the country. People were talking about the disrespect he had shown to the workers, and the conversation was overwhelmingly negative. As the public attention grew, the mayor's political allies began to express concern. They worried about the damage to his reputation, knowing that public opinion could quickly influence elections and funding for future projects. Some suggested that he issue a formal statement or apology, while others urged him to stay silent and hope the situation would fade. The mayor, who was used to controlling narratives and avoiding consequences, found himself in unfamiliar territory. He realized that his actions, previously thought to be inconsequential, were now being judged by a far larger audience than he had imagined. The mayor's opponents seized the opportunity to criticize him. They spoke in public forums, on television, and on social media, highlighting the incident as an example of arrogance, racism, and lack of respect for ordinary citizens. Editorials were published in newspapers, pointing out that someone in a leadership role should set an example, not belittle those who serve the community. Commentators debated whether the mayor's behavior reflected deeper prejudices and questioned whether he was fit to hold his position. The story quickly became more than a local embarrassment, It became a national discussion about respect, equality, and the responsibilities of those in power. Meanwhile, the restaurant staff received an outpouring of support from the community. Customers came in to express their admiration, leaving generous tips, kind notes, and messages of encouragement. People praised the staff for maintaining professionalism in the face of humiliation, highlighting their patience, dignity, and hard work. For many of the workers, this support was validating. It reminded them that their value was not defined by the judgment of a single powerful individual but by their commitment, skill, and the respect they earned from ordinary people. The mayor, initially dismissive of the growing backlash, began to feel the pressure personally. Invitations were rescinded, public appearances became tense, and calls from supporters included polite warnings about the growing dissatisfaction. For the first time, he experienced a kind of public scrutiny that he could not control. People he had once thought would defend him now questioned his actions. Sponsors and partners started reconsidering their associations with him, worried about being linked to someone accused of discrimination and disrespect. In private meetings, his advisors urged him to take the matter seriously. They reminded him that the restaurant incident was no longer just about a single lunch, it had become a symbol of broader societal issues. The mayor, who had long been accustomed to being admired and respected without question, felt cornered. The power he relied on suddenly seemed fragile, and the consequences of his actions became painfully real. For the first time, he was forced to confront the fact that his contempt for others had not gone unnoticed or unpunished. As the mayor reflected on the situation, he also noticed another development. The media coverage included interviews with the restaurant staff and other customers, highlighting the fairness, patience, and skill of those who had been subjected to his rudeness. Their calm, professional responses contrasted sharply with the mayor's behavior, painting him in an even worse light. Readers and viewers could see that the staff were hardworking, respectful, and kind, while he had acted arrogantly, condescendingly, and without empathy. This public comparison further damaged his reputation, showing the stark difference between respect earned through humility and respect demanded through power. The mayor's growing unease became more personal when he noticed that the conversation had reached his friends and family. He received calls and messages from acquaintances, some expressing concern and others expressing disappointment. People he had previously considered loyal began to question his character and values. This realization hit him harder than any public criticism, as it showed that the impact of his actions extended beyond professional consequences and into his personal life. At the same time, the restaurant staff continued to live their lives, inspired by the support they received from the wider community. They spoke to the media cautiously but confidently, sharing their experiences and emphasizing that respect and dignity should be given to everyone, regardless of their job or social status. Their words resonated with viewers and readers, sparking conversations about empathy, fairness, and the importance of treating others with kindness. For many, this story became a reminder that true leadership requires humility, and that everyone deserves to be seen as valuable and human. As the days went on, the mayor began to notice the shift in public perception more intensely. Social media posts, newspaper articles, and news reports constantly referenced the incident, reminding him and others of his behavior. Even his political opponents used it as a talking point in meetings and debates. The initial arrogance he felt at the restaurant had now transformed into a growing sense of anxiety and reflection. He realized that this single event, which he had once thought trivial, had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. It was during this period that the mayor first began to understand a painful truth: power and wealth do not protect a person from the judgment of the community. People remember how leaders treat those who have less power, and disrespect leaves lasting impressions. The video of the restaurant incident was not just a momentary embarrassment, it was a lasting record of his behavior, one that highlighted his prejudices and disregard for ordinary people. For the first time, he was forced to consider the human cost of his arrogance, the hurt and humiliation he had caused to those who had only tried to do their jobs well. By the end of this part of the story, it was clear that the incident at the restaurant had begun to change the course of the mayor's life. He had entered the building expecting a simple meal, nothing more than a routine stop in his busy schedule. Instead, he had left unaware that his actions were about to spark widespread outrage, public debate, and a lesson in humility he would never forget. While the staff returned to their normal lives, strengthened by the recognition and support of their community, the mayor had begun to face the consequences of his own behavior, a journey that would challenge everything he believed about power, entitlement, and respect. The mayor could no longer ignore the growing storm around him. Every morning, he woke up to headlines, social media alerts, and messages that reminded him of his actions at the restaurant. The incident, which he had considered a minor inconvenience, had become a symbol of arrogance and prejudice. As he prepared for his daily schedule, he felt the weight of public judgment pressing down on him in a way he had never experienced before. The office that once felt like a place of unquestioned power now felt like a cage, with every movement scrutinized by the public and the media. His first real confrontation with the situation came during a scheduled town hall meeting. The mayor had expected routine questions about city planning, infrastructure, and community projects. Instead, nearly every question focused on the restaurant incident. Citizens who had previously shown him respect and support now stood at the podium, demanding answers. "Why did you speak to those workers with such disrespect?" one woman asked, her voice steady but filled with disappointment. "Do you believe that people in service jobs are less deserving of respect than those in power?" asked another man, clearly frustrated and seeking accountability. The mayor attempted to respond with vague statements, trying to downplay the incident as a misunderstanding. He claimed that the workers had misunderstood his tone, that he had been stressed, and that it was not his intention to offend anyone. But the citizens were not convinced. They had seen the video, and the video told a very different story. People began interrupting him, their voices rising, echoing through the hall. "We deserve respect," one shouted. "Power doesn't give you the right to belittle others," another exclaimed. The mayor, accustomed to controlling conversations and silencing dissent, felt the first real pangs of fear. For the first time, he realized that words and actions could not always be retracted, and that public opinion could be unforgiving. Meanwhile, the story continued to spread through local and national media. Television anchors discussed the incident at length, showing clips of the video, interviewing experts about workplace respect, and analyzing the broader implications of a leader displaying prejudice. Newspapers printed editorials, emphasizing the need for leaders to demonstrate empathy and humility. Social media campaigns encouraged people to share their experiences with discrimination and disrespect, and many citizens tagged the mayor, holding him accountable for his behavior. The mayor's advisors repeatedly warned him that ignoring the public backlash would only make things worse, but he struggled to fully comprehend the scale of the situation. Inside the mayor's office, the atmosphere grew tense. Staff members whispered among themselves, unsure whether to continue supporting him. Some began distancing themselves, worried about being associated with someone now widely criticized for racism and arrogance. Even allies who had once defended him started urging him to take genuine action, suggesting that a sincere apology and community engagement might help repair his reputation. The mayor, however, found it difficult to admit fault. He had spent years cultivating an image of authority and confidence, and the thought of vulnerability, humility, and public repentance felt alien and uncomfortable. At the same time, the restaurant staff watched the events unfold with a mix of anxiety and pride. Their lives had returned to normal, but the incident continued to affect their world. Customers came in to express support, and many new patrons visited simply to show solidarity. The staff received messages from across the country, praising their professionalism and kindness in the face of humiliation. For them, this recognition was empowering. They had endured disrespect, but they had done so with dignity, and the community's support reminded them that their work mattered, and that they were valued as people. Back at City Hall, the mayor faced an important decision. Public pressure was mounting for him to make amends in a meaningful way. Community leaders organized forums and suggested that he meet with restaurant staff, apologize publicly, and participate in initiatives promoting respect for service workers. For the mayor, this was both humiliating and challenging. He struggled internally, balancing his pride and ego against the undeniable need to address the situation. Every meeting with his advisors left him more anxious. They emphasized that the longer he delayed, the more his reputation would suffer, but the mayor still hoped that somehow, the controversy would die down without him having to admit fault. As days turned into weeks, the mayor began to notice the personal cost of his actions. Friends who had once invited him to social gatherings now avoided him. Invitations to events were rescinded. Sponsors and donors hesitated to associate with him. Even his family noticed the tension, expressing concern for how public perception could affect not only his career but his personal relationships. The mayor began to feel isolated in a way he had never experienced before. Those around him, who had once treated him with unquestioned loyalty, now approached with caution, wary of being caught in the storm of criticism. The tipping point came when a national advocacy group focused on workplace respect and anti-discrimination reached out publicly, calling for the mayor to acknowledge his behavior and take tangible steps to repair the harm he had caused. They highlighted the incident as an example of how prejudice and arrogance from those in power can have real-world impacts on ordinary workers. This public call added pressure from a level beyond the local community, signaling that the story was now a matter of national concern. Faced with mounting pressure, the mayor finally agreed to meet privately with the restaurant staff. The meeting was arranged carefully, with neutral mediators present to ensure that the conversation remained constructive. The mayor entered the restaurant with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of his past actions. The staff greeted him politely, maintaining the same professionalism they had shown during his previous visit. They listened as he spoke, cautiously attentive but guarded. He tried to express regret, acknowledging that his words had been hurtful and that he had failed to show respect for their work. The restaurant staff responded thoughtfully, sharing how his comments had made them feel undervalued and disrespected. They emphasized that their roles, like anyone else's, deserved dignity and appreciation. The conversation was difficult for the mayor, as he faced the human impact of his arrogance for the first time. He had spent his life in positions of authority, rarely confronted with the real emotions of those he had disrespected. Hearing their perspectives directly forced him to reflect deeply, confronting both his behavior and the underlying attitudes that had led to it. After the meeting, the mayor committed to taking further action. He announced a series of initiatives aimed at promoting workplace respect and equality, including town hall discussions with workers from various industries, educational programs in schools about empathy and respect, and public campaigns encouraging fair treatment of service workers. While some criticized these moves as attempts at damage control, others recognized them as genuine steps toward accountability and growth. The mayor realized that earning back public trust would take time, patience, and consistent effort. In parallel, the restaurant staff continued to thrive. Their story inspired other workers who had experienced disrespect or discrimination, showing them that standing firm and maintaining dignity could lead to positive change. Many readers and viewers across the country began sharing their own experiences, creating a broader conversation about respect, empathy, and accountability. The incident, which had begun as a personal humiliation for the staff, became a catalyst for social reflection and awareness. The mayor's journey of reflection extended beyond public appearances. He began attending workshops on cultural sensitivity and bias, seeking to understand how his behavior had been influenced by deeper prejudices. He studied the principles of leadership that emphasized humility, empathy, and service, slowly learning that true power comes not from asserting dominance but from uplifting and respecting others. For the first time, the mayor confronted uncomfortable truths about himself, recognizing that leadership required more than authority, it required compassion and ethical responsibility. Meanwhile, public attention remained high, but there was a noticeable shift. People began to focus not just on the mayor's mistakes, but on the broader lesson his actions had taught. Discussions arose about how society values different kinds of work, the importance of empathy in leadership, and the consequences of disrespecting others, especially those who serve the community. The restaurant incident became a teaching moment, illustrating that even powerful individuals are accountable for their actions, and that public scrutiny is an essential component of justice and equality. As part 3 of the story comes to a close, it becomes clear that the mayor's journey was no longer just about damage control or public image. It had become a personal journey of reflection, humility, and growth. He faced the consequences of his arrogance directly, learning that disrespect and prejudice have tangible effects, and that the opinions of ordinary people carry real weight. The restaurant staff, meanwhile, continued to inspire others with their professionalism and dignity, demonstrating that resilience and integrity can have a lasting impact, even in the face of power and privilege. This part of the story emphasizes not only the social consequences of arrogance but also the personal transformation that begins when someone is forced to confront the harm they have caused. It sets the stage for the final lessons and outcomes, showing that respect, humility, and accountability are essential in leadership and in life. After the mayor's private meeting with the restaurant staff, things began to change slowly but noticeably. The mayor realized that just apologizing was not enough. Words could only go so far, actions had to follow. He began thinking deeply about how he had treated not only these workers but others throughout his career. He started to understand that his arrogance and prejudice had affected many people quietly, leaving them feeling invisible, disrespected, or undervalued. This realization weighed heavily on him, and he could no longer ignore the truth: leadership was about service, not status. To begin repairing his reputation and making amends, the mayor decided to spend a week visiting workplaces all over the city. He planned to meet employees in restaurants, retail stores, hospitals, schools, and factories. At first, he felt nervous, worried that people would confront him angrily or refuse to speak to him. He wasn't used to being in a position where people could freely criticize him. But he pushed himself, knowing that if he truly wanted to change and show respect, he needed to listen and learn. The mayor's first visit was to a small bakery that had been serving the community for decades. The baker, a kind woman in her 50s, greeted him politely but cautiously. She explained the challenges of running a small business, the long hours, and the dedication required to provide excellent service. She also spoke about the moments when customers or even officials treated her staff disrespectfully, making them feel undervalued. The mayor listened quietly, feeling a mixture of guilt and shame. He realized how often he had assumed his position gave him the right to dismiss the experiences of others. He apologized sincerely, thanking her for sharing her story and promising to carry these lessons forward. From there, the mayor visited several other workplaces. In each place, he observed employees working hard, dealing with difficult situations, and treating every customer with patience and care. He saw janitors cleaning buildings late at night, teachers staying after school to help students, nurses attending to patients with compassion, and cashiers managing long lines with smiles despite their exhaustion. Every interaction revealed the dignity and dedication present in every role, regardless of social status or pay. For the mayor, this was eye-opening. He began to understand that respect was not earned by authority alone, it had to be given to everyone, no matter their job or position. The mayor also began holding open forums in various neighborhoods, inviting residents to speak freely about their experiences with discrimination, disrespect, or inequality. At first, these forums were uncomfortable for him. He was not used to being in a room where people could openly criticize his actions and decisions. Some attendees spoke with frustration, recalling incidents where they had been treated unfairly by city officials, bosses, or other people in positions of power. Others shared stories of resilience, explaining how they continued to work hard and contribute to their communities despite facing prejudice. The mayor listened, sometimes silently, sometimes taking notes, absorbing every word as if it were a lesson he had been avoiding all his life. Meanwhile, the restaurant staff watched these developments with cautious optimism. They had never sought fame or recognition, but they were beginning to see that their story had sparked something larger than themselves. Their courage in standing up to disrespect had inspired not only the mayor but also countless others who had experienced similar situations. Some of the staff began sharing their own perspectives in community meetings, workshops, and online discussions, emphasizing the importance of dignity, patience, and professionalism. They had learned that their voices mattered, and that even ordinary actions could create extraordinary change when combined with integrity. The mayor's transformation did not happen overnight. There were setbacks and moments of self-doubt. Old habits, prejudices, and assumptions occasionally resurfaced, reminding him of how deeply ingrained some of his attitudes had been. But each time he faced these challenges, he reminded himself of the impact of his words on the restaurant staff, the employees he had visited, and the community as a whole. He began to see that personal growth required effort, humility, and an honest acknowledgement of one's mistakes. As the mayor became more involved in community initiatives, he started implementing policies to promote fairness and respect in workplaces across the city. He introduced programs to educate city employees about cultural sensitivity, anti-discrimination practices, and respectful communication. He partnered with local organizations to create mentorship programs for young workers, teaching them that their contributions were valuable and that they deserved recognition regardless of their position. The mayor also encouraged public recognition for employees in service roles, highlighting their dedication and hard work through awards, social media posts, and community events. These efforts were widely praised, signaling a turning point in public perception. Despite these positive steps, criticism persisted. Some people accused the mayor of only acting to save his reputation, suggesting that his transformation was motivated by self-interest rather than genuine empathy. While the mayor initially felt defensive, he eventually realized that the opinions of others were not the true measure of his change. Real transformation was reflected in his actions, his daily decisions, and the way he treated people consistently, even when no one was watching. He understood that the path to redemption was long, and that patience and persistence were essential. The mayor also made efforts to build personal relationships with individuals who had experienced discrimination or disrespect. He met with people from diverse backgrounds, listening to their stories, and learning about the challenges they faced. He discovered that prejudice was not always overt, sometimes it was subtle, expressed through assumptions, microaggressions, or dismissive behavior. By acknowledging these realities and committing to change, he began to cultivate empathy in ways he had never experienced before. The mayor realized that leadership required emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and connect with the experiences of others, and a willingness to act with compassion. During this period, the mayor occasionally revisited the restaurant where the original incident had occurred. He observed the staff from a distance, noting how professionally they interacted with customers and how calmly they managed challenging situations. He reflected on his behavior and recognized the courage it must have taken for them to maintain their dignity in the face of disrespect. Each visit reminded him of the lessons he had learned: humility, empathy, and the importance of valuing every individual. The mayor's journey also inspired others in positions of power. Local officials, business owners, and community leaders began reflecting on their own behavior, asking whether they were treating employees and colleagues with fairness and respect. Workshops, seminars, and discussions emerged across the city, encouraging a culture of accountability and ethical leadership. The incident, which had begun as a moment of disgrace for the mayor, evolved into a catalyst for broader social change, demonstrating the power of personal accountability and the ripple effect of respectful behavior. At the same time, the mayor's personal life began to change. Friends and family noticed a shift in his demeanor. He was more patient, attentive, and willing to listen. He engaged in conversations about social issues more thoughtfully and encouraged discussions about empathy and respect within his household. These changes strengthened his personal relationships, showing him that the benefits of growth extended beyond public perception into everyday life. The restaurant staff, meanwhile, continued to serve as an example of professionalism and integrity. Their calm, respectful demeanor in the original incident had set the stage for a city-wide conversation about respect and leadership. They inspired other workers to stand firm in the face of disrespect, demonstrating that dignity and courage could influence even powerful individuals. They also became advocates for fair treatment in the workplace, participating in community discussions, mentoring young employees, and sharing their experiences to promote awareness and change. By the end of this period, the mayor had transformed from a figure of arrogance and prejudice into a leader who understood the value of humility, empathy, and respect. He still had much to learn, but the foundations of his personal growth were clear. He recognized that leadership was not about commanding authority, but about serving others and fostering an environment where everyone felt valued. He had learned that words have power, that actions have consequences, and that the true measure of a leader is reflected in how they treat those who have the least power. The story in Part 4 highlights the gradual, often difficult process of personal growth and societal impact. It shows that facing the consequences of one's actions, listening to others, and committing to consistent change can lead to meaningful transformation. It also emphasizes the role of ordinary people, like the restaurant staff, in inspiring change and holding those in power accountable. By demonstrating professionalism and courage, they became agents of positive change, proving that respect, integrity, and dignity are not limited by social status or authority. As Part 4 comes to a close, the mayor stands at a crossroads. He has learned valuable lessons about empathy, humility, and accountability, but the ultimate test of his transformation will come in the long-term application of these principles. The community is watching, the staff remains a symbol of dignity, and the city as a whole is beginning to embrace a culture of respect. The incident that once symbolized arrogance and prejudice is now a turning point, demonstrating that even the most powerful individuals can learn, change, and contribute to a more just and compassionate society. Over the following months, the mayor's commitment to change began to bear visible fruit. His efforts were no longer just about making amends, they had become a genuine way of life. He had learned that respect, empathy, and understanding were not optional qualities for a leader, they were essential. People in the city began to notice a difference in him. Where once he had been distant, dismissive, or even arrogant, he now approached each person with curiosity, humility, and patience. This shift, though subtle at first, transformed the way citizens engaged with him. They began to see him as a leader who could listen, learn, and act in the best interest of all. The restaurant where the original incident had occurred remained a symbolic place for both the mayor and the staff. The workers there, once wary of his presence, now greeted him with polite smiles and open conversation. There was no need for reminders or formal apologies anymore. The mayor's behavior had changed so fundamentally that he no longer treated anyone with contempt or superiority. Instead, he began visiting to observe, ask questions, and offer assistance where possible. He took interest in the daily operations, asking about challenges, achievements, and opportunities for improvement. Through these interactions, he discovered the depth of skill, creativity, and dedication required to run a successful restaurant. It was a revelation that reshaped his understanding of work, effort, and human potential. The staff, meanwhile, remained grounded. They had already made their mark by standing firm in their dignity, and now they were witnessing a true transformation in someone who had once been a source of distress. They saw that their commitment to professionalism and patience had not only changed one man's perspective but also had begun influencing the wider community. Customers and colleagues began to speak differently about the mayor, noting his attentiveness, fairness, and respect toward every worker he met. The staff realized that they had become a catalyst for real change, showing that courage, consistency, and integrity could influence even the most powerful figures. The mayor also began initiating programs to ensure that his newfound understanding was applied throughout the city. He implemented workshops for city employees focused on empathy, conflict resolution, and cultural sensitivity. He encouraged businesses to adopt fair treatment policies, recognizing employees who went above and beyond and ensuring that those in service positions were acknowledged for their contributions. He even created awards that highlighted the achievements of workers from all walks of life, demonstrating publicly that every role mattered. These programs, inspired by his initial encounter with the restaurant staff, slowly began transforming the city's culture into one where respect and fairness were no longer optional but expected. Despite these successes, the mayor faced ongoing challenges. Some individuals were skeptical of his change, questioning whether it was genuine or merely performative. There were also moments when his old tendencies threatened to resurface, times when impatience, frustration, or assumptions could have led him back into old habits. Each time, however, he remembered the restaurant staff, their composure, and their insistence on dignity. He reflected on how easily he had dismissed them before and how deeply their courage had affected him. These memories served as a constant reminder that his actions now carried meaning beyond himself. They affected the trust, morale, and well-being of the entire community. Personal growth, the mayor realized, required constant effort. He began keeping a journal to record interactions, reflections, and lessons learned. He documented both successes and setbacks, ensuring that every experience became an opportunity to learn and improve. In these writings, he often revisited the restaurant incident, not with shame alone but with gratitude. He understood that it had been a turning point, one that forced him to confront his prejudice, arrogance, and assumptions. Without that moment, he might never have embarked on the difficult but rewarding journey of transformation. The city noticed not just the mayor's change, but also the ripple effects of his actions. Community members started speaking more openly about respect, fairness, and equality in workplaces. People became more willing to advocate for themselves and others, inspired by the example of the restaurant staff. Businesses began to recognize the value of treating employees well, not only for ethical reasons but also because it improved morale, productivity, and customer satisfaction. The mayor's personal journey had become a public lesson in leadership, empathy, and accountability. Meanwhile, the restaurant staff continued to thrive. Their lives were not defined solely by the incident, but they carried the lesson of dignity forward in everything they did. They mentored younger employees, shared their experiences in community workshops, and served as role models for professionalism. Their courage and integrity had created a lasting impact, demonstrating that standing firm in one's values, even in the face of disrespect, could inspire change far beyond their own immediate environment. The mayor also began participating in broader initiatives aimed at social justice and inclusion. He partnered with organizations to address systemic issues, from workplace discrimination to community development. His earlier arrogance had given way to a sincere desire to make a meaningful difference, not for recognition but because he had finally understood the human cost of disrespect and prejudice. He used his position not to assert authority but to empower others, creating opportunities for growth, recognition, and equality. One day, the mayor organized a public event to honor local workers across all industries. The restaurant staff were invited as special guests, recognized for their professionalism and courage. As the mayor spoke, he openly acknowledged the lesson he had learned from them, explaining how their actions had transformed not only his perspective but also the culture of leadership in the city. He expressed gratitude, humility, and admiration, admitting that he had once failed them but had now committed to being a better leader and human being. The audience, inspired by both the mayor's transformation and the staff's courage, responded with applause, marking a symbolic moment of reconciliation, respect, and shared growth. The impact of this event extended far beyond that day. Stories of the mayor's transformation and the staff's integrity were shared in newspapers, social media, and community discussions. The incident became a case study in leadership training, highlighting the importance of humility, empathy, and the courage to face one's mistakes. It showed that accountability, when combined with sincere effort, could lead to profound change, even in deeply ingrained attitudes and behaviors. As time passed, the mayor maintained his commitment to respect and empathy. He continued visiting workplaces, listening to employees, and supporting initiatives that promoted fairness and inclusion. His leadership style had shifted fundamentally, from one based on authority and assumption to one rooted in service, understanding, and collaboration. The community responded positively, not because he demanded respect, but because he consistently demonstrated it in his actions and decisions. The restaurant staff, having witnessed this full arc of transformation, felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. They had never sought recognition or reward, yet their steadfast commitment to dignity had influenced one of the most powerful individuals in their city. They had turned a moment of personal challenge into a catalyst for societal change, proving that courage, integrity, and patience could inspire even those who seemed untouchable. Their story became a lasting example of how ordinary people, by standing firm in their values, could create extraordinary impact. By the end of this journey, the mayor had truly learned the most important lesson of his life, that power and position are meaningless without empathy, respect, and accountability. Leadership is not about asserting superiority or dismissing those deemed less important. True leadership, he realized, is about service, understanding, and creating an environment where every individual feels valued. The incident that once marked him as arrogant and prejudiced had become the foundation of a more compassionate, thoughtful, and inclusive approach to leadership. The city, too, benefited from this transformation. Workplaces became more respectful, leaders more mindful, and community interactions more considerate. The ripple effect of a single moment. The restaurant incident demonstrated the potential for change when courage meets accountability, and when integrity inspires leadership. The lesson was clear: disrespect and prejudice can be corrected, but only if one is willing to face mistakes, listen, and act with sincerity. In the quiet moments, the mayor often reflected on the restaurant staff, the incident that changed his life, and the ongoing journey of growth. He knew that transformation is not a destination but a process, one that requires vigilance, humility, and empathy. Yet he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lesson, recognizing that it had reshaped his life in ways he could never have imagined. It had taught him to value every human being, respect every worker, and approach life with a sense of responsibility and care. And so, the story concluded not with punishment or shame, but with growth, understanding, and reconciliation. The mayor became a leader who truly served his people, and the restaurant staff became symbols of dignity, courage, and the power of standing up for what is right. Their combined influence created a lasting legacy, a city more aware, more compassionate, and more committed to fairness and respect for all. In the end, everyone involved had learned something profound: that human decency, when practiced consistently, has the power to change hearts, minds, and even entire communities.